that to you today, but I will introduce our team. So Roger's the leader of our team, and then we've got Jim Masio, Francis Kane, I'm Ellen, and then Ashley is here in the office, and she's here most days if you ever needed to have a touch point for our team. So I was going to talk about one listing that we have that's I would call land redevelopment. And so we had this property on the market. We actually still have it on the market. But even though it's a built structure, it is really not salvageable. So in that regard, we looked at it as what's the highest and best use that we can market it to developers for. And so, for instance, this property is about 10,000 square feet. It's right across from the Paramount Studios in East Hollywood area, and the zoning is commercial. And in the city of LA, commercial zoning allows for residential as well. So, and then additionally, there's a transportation incentive overlay in this area. So you can get about 37 units on this property, multifamily units. So then when you have that information, you can go out and talk to developers and say, especially ones that are who develop smaller multifamily projects, and you can try to match that buyer with your property. So that's one strategy on looking at a property that already has a building on it, but that's really not going to be able to be the end use. And I also thought maybe, I started off with this, and maybe I'm saying things that maybe don't quite, you're not familiar with, so I did want to go over some terms that I thought might be helpful about zoning and land use. And that's one of the printed out copies that's with you right now. How many? Can I get one? Oh, sorry.
Just the black piece, this one.
Just the black?
Yeah.
Sorry. So how many of you are into development or zoning and things like that? Is that an interest of yours, or are you mostly residential agents? Can I get a straw poll?
Mostly residential, but a lot of the times investors will ask what the zoning is, and if you know it.
Okay. Yeah. So zoning is basically the designation for the uses allowed on a parcel. So if it's R1, for instance, a lot of cities call R1 not single family housing. And then the C usually means commercial in other places, but there's always going to be different in every city. You have to go back to the code and look it up. But then there's other things that developers are looking at, and which are general plans, community plans, and specific plans. So those are the things that are the long-term documents for a city that governs their development. So if you look at the Valley, you've got the Warner Center specific plan, and that is a document that covers an area that up to 40 years a look ahead. And so when you're developing, you want to be mindful of what the city already intended for areas, because they're more likely to approve your projects that you're presenting if they are in alignment with those things. So if your plans aren't in alignment with those things, then if you go down to the bottom, general plan amendments, that's when you go through a process to try to get an approval for something that's not foreseen by the city for that property. When you're doing normal zone changes, then that is when you're asking for something that the city has planned for, but your parcel somehow has never been pulled into that category. And then when you hear people talk about entitlements for land, what they're talking about are the things the kind of general concept for the project, like let's say I imagine a 5-story, 150 unit commercial, or multifamily building with ground floor retail. So you present that to the city through the planning department, and they say, yeah, we like your concept, but we're gonna put some conditions on that. You have to widen the street, or you have to, your building can only be so tall. And then, once you are done with that step, then you go to the, now I can do my real construction drawings and get my permits. So there's a multi-step process in any land development. And going back to brokerage, when we have land to sell, we may be in different parts of that process. So it could be raw land, which is, none of that stuff has been done, but maybe you have the right zoning for what you want to do. Sometimes you have entitlements completed, but you don't have your construction documents. And then sometimes you're ready to issue, where you're trying to sell it to a developer and it's ready for shovels in the ground. So, and then of course at the end, which is the funner part, is when the project's completed, then you get to sell the building that they built. So, but those are kind of some key terms that people talk about. I missed the overlays. So the overlays are good and bad. So historic preservation overlay, for instance, is one of those that cuts both ways. It's good to see certain parts of the city acknowledge that they have a historic elements and they can preserve those things, but it can also be an impediment for new development. And so those areas either thrive because of their overlay, sometimes they just wither away because there's no incentive for developers to come in and revitalize the area.
Would an example of that be Altadena, supposedly the two historic business district area?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly. So I don't know the specifics of that historic overlay, but yeah, if they want to maintain that height, I imagine it's kind of probably a height limit, because historically things were shorter, and certain features to the building. It's a little different because they were burned down. So rebuilding them exactly how they were probably is actually a little more economically feasible. But what would be more economically feasible is actually if you could build even more, because because we know a lot of people aren't going to be made whole from their insurance, and especially commercial buildings, they aren't getting a lot of aid from the state and the U.S. government. So they're really in a challenging position where if they can build more than they had before, they're gonna, have a chance of maybe crawling out of that financial hole that they're in. So, but yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So then, this is a project Roger and I are working on, and just moving on to more land development. So this is a single family home lot. So this is also kind of relatable to the Altadena projects, because a lot of people are, in a position they never thought they would be. I have a single family home lot, I need to rebuild my house. What do I need to think about? So this happens to be in Mammoth, but it's analogous anywhere you go to do a single family home. So we had a property that was a vacant lot. I don't know if you can see that. The vacant lot right here, and then it's in a developed area, so it's along a street that's already has access, and there's homes built on either side of it, so it's a developable area. So what our intention was, and what we did do was we developed plans. We're in the process of obtaining building and grading and utility permits. we had to assemble our design team. So we got a surveyor to survey the property. We got our civil engineer to design the grading plan, worked with the architect to design the house layout and to work with the topography, because this is an upsloping lot. Then you move on to the structural engineer and see what you have to, what are the requirements of the code, and are you gonna need any, can you just build with wood, do you need any steel? We also had a truss manufacturer who's not on the list, but you know, that they contribute to the design of the property as well. And the soils engineer, he comes in early actually, along with the surveyor, where he does some drilling, tells us what our conditions are, and having that soils engineer on board is good because they can help you actually fine-tune your structural engineering and not over-design the property. Because every time you over-design something, it costs more to build. So this is, we're still have this property, and we're waiting to get the permits. So I thought that would be a good example of just letting you know how, like, you can buy the raw land, and so the time frame on that was, we bought the lot in June of 2024, and then we submitted for permits around December of 2024, and we're still waiting for approvals, but we've been through 2 plan checks. So it doesn't, it doesn't, everybody, it's like Hawaii, it's a little slower pace. But we're getting through the process, and we hope to have ready to issue permits here in like a few weeks. So, that's a point where we could sell it. We could sell it to somebody who wanted to build it, or we've been also bidding it out to contractors to see if we want to build it and then sell it when it's completed. So that's like a kind of a spec house build. But a lot of that, the design team is the same design team you use for a lot, a new home and a lot now, for instance. And then I thought I'd talk about the multifamily in the context of value add, because that's a pretty common, investment strategy. So I took an example of a 16-unit building. This one happens to be in Phoenix. It's had a low-paying tenants, low rent, and the building needed upgrading. So we purchased the property and then did some renovations on the units. All the interiors, the exterior, redid the parking lots, painted, and the idea with this was that you increase the rents after you've now increased the units, or renovated the units so they're nicer to live in, and then you establish a better cash flow than you had before, and then you can either keep it as an investment property with the cash flow, or you can sell it now that you've increased the value. And then there's cap rates. Do you guys, is a cap rate a kind of a familiar term, or? Yes. Yeah. So that's directly related to how you value a multifamily property. And so the next slide is really hard to see. That's why we printed it out. But this is a typical one-page financial analysis that we do for our clients as well, if they're buying or they're selling their multifamily property. So we look at it in 2 ways: what it's currently at and what it could be at the market rents. So, and then the associated cap rates. Yeah, so this is, a little dense in information, so apologies for that, but there's some key kind of points on the chart. Up in the left corner, top corner, there's a cap rate, current and market rate. So the market rate is what you're trying to get to, and the cap rate represents the investment percentage return if you were to look at it on a cash basis. So if you bought a building for $3 million cash, and you had a 10% return on investment, you would get that means you have $300,000 net operating income every year. So, 10% is pretty good, really good, right? On a cash basis. So, most deals in LA are trading at lower cap rates, like around 5. Even though they have opportunity to get higher interest or higher rents. There's a lot of rules, as everybody may be aware of, about rent control and things like that. So the people who buy apartments in LA are mostly looking for that appreciation over a long term, and they're not counting so much on being able to increase the rents immediately because they're heavily restricted by legislation, so, and different city requirements.
Did you guys sell that property, or are you keeping it, the one in Phoenix?
We sold it, yeah. Yeah.
What kind of return did you get on it? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but the goal is pay back your investors and give them a good return. So we did meet that, and so we only held it for about 6 months. So I think we got about 15% return for our investors on their cash, but then over a year, the annualized return would be 30%. So because they only had their money out of pocket for about 6 months.
Nice.
I have a question. Is commercial different from residential? Like when you're licensed in commercial, is that?
It's not a different license. Yeah. So for commercial though, Roger's licensed. He and his son Max are licensed in Arizona.
Oh.
So and then I personally just invest in Arizona. So but I'm licensed in California, and I don't have a special license. There's special designations you can get as a commercial agent. So does Roger have a CCIM? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Roger has CCIM, which is a commercial designation, and it. So you just know, you've been trained in every level of commercial property. So, and then he's got 30 years of experience and more in.
Let's age him a little more.
Commercial. So, yeah, so you don't need that, but the thing is that are some, I guess if you don't know about commercial transactions, you can get yourself into trouble as a residential agent. And so, because your focus has been on residential transactions. And so that's kind of what the next part of the presentation is about. It's, referrals. So if you say to yourself, oh, development, that sounds cool, and multifamily, and what, but, that's really not my bag. I want to kind of stay in my, money-making lane of single-family residential, but I happen to know wealthy clients. I have wealthy clients who are also business owners, or, looking to expand their business, or they want an investment property, or whatever it is. Then, that's a good way to make some extra money without a lot of headache. You can kind of ask your clients, certain questions that I think we have a list of later, but that's kind of the gist of it. It's, if you feel like that's really just not somewhere you wanna practice, you have a whole team here in our office, that, you know, does commercial real estate, and all of us do a little bit different things, so, you know, some of us do more leasing, some of us do more sales of, office, or churches, or land, or multifamily, so we kind of can cover most sectors of the commercial market in our team, so,
And just one thing we need to remember is that as residential agents, we need to bring in a commercial agent if they're doing anything over 4 units. It's
yeah, so,
required.
for multifamily, yeah, anything, 4 units and lower is residential, and then 5 units and more is commercial, so, and that goes for how it's financed as well. So commercial financing is also different in that most commercial financing, unless you go through some government programs, is actually only a 5-year loan. Even though they look at that loan over a 30-year period, like for the payment, if you're gonna buy a commercial property, your loan interest rate is really only locked in for that 5 years. So, and then you have to refi. That's kind of another topic, but yeah, there's a whole wave of refinancing that's coming for commercial real estate, right? And everybody's concerned about that. That's for another day.
For just say a first homeowner, does that go with commercial as well?
First
Like
time
if just say if this is their first property they're buying, are they allowed to buy, you know, will they get a loan for, instead of buying residential, get commercial, buildings?
You mean, what kind of, it's really based on the type of property.
Okay, so
So-
if they wanted
so
to
if-
buy a 5-unit,
A 5-unit is a commercial.
okay.
And it doesn't, so it'll be up to like their, mostly financial situation. If, let's say it's 5 units, then a bank's not gonna probably, if you have the money, they're not gonna look at your history as much as they would if like you're trying to buy a 100-unit building.
Okay.
So if you're trying to buy a 100-unit building, they're gonna probably look and see if you have owned other buildings, cause they don't want to have someone who doesn't know how to run, you know, multifamily property and be able to pay that, bank note. So, but I know you had someone interested in a
Arizona,
3-unit property, and they wanted to live in one of the units and then use the other 2 units as offsetting the cost of their mortgage, which they would apply for a 30-year, like a normal, they could do if they're a first-time home buyer for FHA loan or something, but yeah, that's, but if it's under 4 and under units, it's residential. And, but just from the FHA, if you guys probably already noticed, but you can, the limits are for single family, and then they go up for duplex, triplex, and a fourplex, so, that's always nice, because they, even the FHA loans acknowledge that that goes up to 4 units. Oh yeah, so this is just an example of like, amount of, money that you would make on a home sale, and kind of breaking it down to dollars per hour, you know. So let's say you spent 100 hours on a home sale, your commission was $30,000, and you're making $300 an hour. And then if you were to refer a commercial property and you got 25% of the commission as a referral fee, you know, the time spent is very limited, therefore the return on investment is very high for you, and you know you're making a lot of money, mostly for the connections you already have. So that's kind of the enticement there.
Do commercial deals generally take longer though?
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they can just be kind of hovering in the background.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to mention about the land development stuff that I didn't put on the slide is that, you know, not finished buildings, but any kind of land deal or any kind of development deal, they can have very long escrows. So sometimes they're, you know, a year, because the entitlement, they want to do those entitlements entitlements in that year. So, you know, you're in escrow and they might even have money released at certain points. So after due diligence, they might release some money and, you know, it's a different deal structure than single family or residential. So, you kind of have to be patient. Even when you're selling an office building, it's a long runway to get it sold, so.
We've been in escrow since December for one of our properties. Right?
Yes, we have one, that's,
Oh my God.
it was since November, it was supposed to close in December. And then it got extended in January, and then it got extended in February, and now it's supposed to close in April 26th.
And we'll wait and see.
Yeah. But the seller did release $200,000, you know, so, you know, not a lot of people are gonna walk away from that kind of money, so we really hope they'll close.
Yeah.
And, so. But yeah, that's why it's something that can kind of just be, plugging along in the background, you know.
Is it an office?
That was my daughter, sorry.
Is that your phone I can hear?
Yes, yes, so I turned it off right here, but it didn't work all the way over there, so. And so, okay, so this is identified. Yeah, so this is just ideas about looking in your database, you know, listening when you're talking to your clients about other things, you know, what their plans are for the future, you know, if they own a business, are they starting a business, are they looking to lease some space, yeah, do they want to own their own investments, with all, you know, if they're making a lot of money that they, you know, need to place, or it could be, you know, inheriting money. There's gonna be a large group of people inheriting, property and they may not know how to run it like their parents did, and, you know, they may need, to, sell it and invest it in something else. And then it's, you know, staying within KW. So that's,
How many commercial agents do we have in the office?
the office.
On your team, you have,
On our team, we have us 5, and then there's a couple more that are probably joining our team. And I don't know, are there like 25 commercial agents in our office?
maybe so. The guy that walked through a few minutes ago, he was a commercial agent. You don't see them very often.
Well, he specializes in apartment.
What's that?
He specializes in apartment, yes. Yeah, for what I understand.
He what?
The guy specializes in apartments, I think, or?
Yeah, it's just like,
Family, yeah.
yeah, that's a very, popular thing to specialize in, multifamily.
Yeah.
And I think the Kevins, they mostly do.
The Kevins do mostly
Multifamily, yeah.
Was he one of the Kevins?
That's Kevin Lutz.
That's what I
Yeah.
thought.
One of the Kevins.
Okay. Yes. So, yeah, it's, there's other commercial agents in the office, there's, other Keller Williams offices that don't have any commercial agents.
Right.
So, you know, it just depends on the market center.
Do you have agents that speak different languages in commercial, do you know?
Well, Francis speaks Chinese.
I was thinking, it is a new one, right?
Yes, Francis is relatively new, I mean, maybe,
Is your team?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
and I can go back to Francis, Kane, and then, Jim actually is here now, stand up, Jim.
We love Jim.
And I think that's about it. I mean, you know, basically you're just on the lookout for the referrals. You're on the lookout for the, you know, business owners, your wealthy clients, you know, corporate executives, those type of folks. So, you know, you can ask questions like, you are you looking to buy? If you just sold something, they can 1031, which is a tax shelter for properties that they sell. You guys, 1031, is that something that you are familiar with?
No.
Anyone?
You know what, there are some new agents though that don't know what it is probably.
Oh, okay, so,
That's a whole different class.
Yeah, it is, but
Yeah.
it's a brief.
but a snippet of it is, someone has sold, they're selling some real estate that they've owned for a long time, and they're gonna be selling it for a lot more than they bought it for, so they're gonna have this gain on their property. And, it will be taxed if they don't reinvest it in something else.
And how
so-
long do you have to reinvest?
So you have 45 days to identify, and I believe 180 days to close. So, yeah, so you can't let it linger, they have to make that decision and go for it, so. Yeah, the more information that you can garner from them, if you're gonna refer someone, the better. So if you can find out, what their timing expectations are, how soon they're looking to purchase property, or how soon they're willing to sell a property, and, are they the decision maker, is really the important part. Do they get to decide, or do they have to ask like 4 other siblings to help them decide, so there's always those kind of transactions.
So Alan, if we don't know who does what in commercial and we call you or Roger
Uh-huh.
and say, we have this type of property, are you gonna direct us to someone else who does specialize in it? Or do you basically do everything, but you just specialize in land development and?
Well, our team kind of covers a lot of bases, but yeah, if there's something we don't do, then we can refer to another client. And they have, like when I've heard people talk about commercial referrals is, you don't daisy chain the referral. If we can't help you and we refer you to another commercial agent, we're not gonna insert ourselves in that connection,
Great,
so.
thank you.
Yeah,
You have a bunch of commercial people over here.
yeah, there's, there's something for everybody here in our office, in our market center, so I think, we could definitely find the right person for you, or your client.
As far as qualifying goes, we usually get a lot of emails of residential, agents that will email us and say, hey, I have a client looking for this amount of square footage, can you help them out? And if we can't help them out, we'll go ahead and sign a contract with them, give them the process, which basically is submitting your financials so that you know that you're qualified, so that we're not wasting anybody's time. And, so we try to get that done as soon as possible. As soon as we make the connection, we'll let them know right away, okay, yeah, we found properties for you, or, or we can have somebody else help you out.
And then you wanna tell them about other, you've signed up other agents with referrals.
Yeah, I've done other referrals before, and it's, like she said, you're kind of out of the mix, it's just kind of something in your back pocket. So once we close escrow, we'll go ahead and send you over the referral, sheet, which is this paper here. And as soon as we'll let Karen know, and then Karen will, from the commission that we get, she'll go ahead and give you guys a check as well.
So you don't do the referral fee agreement up front with us?
Not until we close on a property with them. So once they close everything, cause if we don't have a deal with them, or if they don't end up buying, then we won't get any commission from it, so.
And if the escrow is longer too, that makes sense, you just don't know what's in it.
Yeah, exactly, so once it closes, then we'll have this sheet done, and then once we do like our CDA, for whoever's on the listing, then we'll include your name on the listing as well, so.
It's a little different in residential.
Yeah. We get it up front.
Yeah.
You send out the referral agreement right up front.
Yeah, and so we can do whatever people feel comfortable with, but that's kind of why there's usually a big delay, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's in office.
Commercial moves a lot slower than.
It's in office,
Track
we're
record.
emails back and forth, it's not like.
Right.
February.
That's the only thing, but
Yeah.
they're here.
Yeah. It was just surprising.
And then is it, let's see, anybody questions about either land development, multifamily? That's the spreadsheet.
What's Roger gonna do about his property in Altadena, does he know yet?
Well, I know he's designing a house for it, so I've looked at the plans, he's, working on that, so I don't know other than, with a house with an ADU. So,
Is that like a new build?
yeah, his house burned down in the Altadena fires, and so, he's looking at options to rebuild, yes.
That's a whole different bailiwick, you know, Lizette, what are you gonna do, do you know?
I don't know, I'm gonna wait another couple of months and decide, yeah.
It's like, big decisions.
Yeah, I know, it's a lot. Yeah, and probably if I build, it will be something with an ADU in the back.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know,
Yeah.
make lemonade out of lemons, you know?
Yeah.
So,
It's amazing to me how many lots have already sold in Altadena.
Yeah.
Yeah, where now I think Roger wants to go look at a bunch of lots that are just empty and they still need to be cleaned up. About 40 on the market right now in Altadena.
There are 40?
40 lots, yeah.
Yikes.
Jim, do you remember how many have closed? Jim?
58 closed as of Friday.
They're ranging, they're
Yeah, I think I saw the average yesterday, was like, average list on the market right now is like 764, but there's like two that are throwing it off. And I'd say average close is like in the sixes.
I got 651.
Yeah, but it's about
How
seven.
much, Jim?
Yeah.
651, they're selling at 108% of list.
Is there an average square foot price that we?
It's, the average price is 651, average lot size is 11,000.
Well, actually, the client that I sold the lot earlier, now he wants to buy a house or buy another lot, which it doesn't make sense to me because he sold his lot. But he was up near the hill, so he wants to buy a lot a little bit
Yeah.
lower
Yeah.
and develop.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so
And it's
that's why-
easier to build on a flatter lot.
Yeah,
Right.
he was up on the hill, he said, yeah.
Yeah.
So now he wants to buy or buy lower down. Yeah, yeah,
Crazy.
yeah. So people are starting to, because I saw one of the neighbors yesterday, still when I was in the Starbucks, because we haven't communicated, and they are like, we're still overwhelmed with, all the tragedy and everything, so it's
Yeah.
hard to make decisions, especially when you get older, to, if just deciding on how to remodel the bathroom now, do a whole house, that's the thing,
Right, it's a lot of decisions.
Yeah, a lot of
If you
decisions.
decide to go forward with that route, it is a lot
Yeah.
of decisions
Yeah,
down the whole line, yeah.
down the- yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it's, yeah.
Well,
Land
thanks.
development.
Right, yeah. If somebody tells me, okay, we decide everything for you, I will. I'm on it, at this point, at least by now. But I think that people are starting to think that they're gonna, some people rebuild,
Good.
yeah.
I mean, I hope a good portion of people decide to rebuild.
Yeah,
And stay, the people who originally owned the property.
right.
Looking for in the future, that's a.
Yeah, the good thing is it's gonna be fire resistant. The only thing that they won't be able to rebuild the same quality, the architecture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the architecture was very
One thing I wanted to add to that is because in California, when you're doing a new build, or ADUs or new construction with Title 24, you're gonna have to put solar on that structure. So, if you're building an ADU as well as a main house, so you can put it all together under one system and power both structures. So people who were grandfathered in didn't need to, you know, all the time, but only for ADUs. Now in California, because the utility companies can't keep up with the demand, so they're requiring any new structures, any new, you know, residential to put solar on it to help them offset the electricity that they're supplying, right? So that's something to keep in mind also, and it's, you know, with the blackouts that happen as well, batteries and solar, it's gonna give you power when the grid goes down. So if Edison says you're not gonna have power for 3 days, if you have solar and batteries, you could tell them, I'm good, you know? And I think that's gonna be something that's gonna be more relevant moving forward, especially after, you know, everything that happened.
And it's good that your product is made in the USA.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully, you know, the tariffs don't affect, you know, USA made panels, but unfortunately some parts, like let's say if it's a small part that goes in a battery or it's an inverter that might come from overseas, right? So we don't know what's happening with these tariffs, but we're just dreading that pricing and, you know, just import, export, that whole thing, it's gonna go up. So we're trying to push homeowners, do it before something changes that's gonna affect it. And, you know, once you're in, you know, you're locked in, so.
So you're gonna update that too, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're the pattern.
Absolutely.
Now it's always new,
Yeah,
right? Change
and we're
a
still
lot.
waiting, we don't know what's gonna happen, so, you know.
The panels
Well,
are
you
different.
should network, I should give you the telephone number of one architect that, you know,
That's right.
maybe you should network with the architects that are working in the area.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's talk, that would be
yeah,
great.
I could give you their, yeah.
David, what is that, law start, or did it already?
It's already in effect. So if it's Title 24 in California, anytime you do an ADU or a new construction for residential, I don't know if that's true for commercial, you could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think for commercial.
It's, different rules, but yeah, it's usually required.
Yeah, so for residential, you know, for the inspector to sort of stamp that project and say, you know, you're passed, you're good to go, you have to have some sort of solar plans drawn up, and then you have to get it installed and they have to come verify it and check, make sure it's all good, and then, you know, then you could finish your project.
And they probably gonna put, sprinklers also in the roof.
Oh, yeah, they are doing that.
So all these new things that are coming out, right, now you have to have sprinklers or, you know, electric, you know, you're specializing in commercial buildings, so now, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't have gas stoves because it's a fire hazard.
Oh, right, a lot of it's by city right now, I think, but yeah, a lot of cities are mandating electric appliances only. So, no gas appliances.
Right, so this is moving forward in the sense that the electricity usage and the demand, it's, you know, it's going up because they're trying to push electrical appliances because, you know, gas could be a fire hazard, it could be a gas leak, right? But, so.
I'm not giving up my gas.
Yeah.
Say, like, override that line.
I like the fire.
I like cooking.
I know, no hot plates.
Well, there will be food at about 11:30. So it's a little early now, but yeah, there'll be food at 11:30. And so if you want to come back by, or it'll be set up over here. So hopefully we'll see you at lunch-ish. Thanks for listening. Let's see. I think we
Lobster
ended
tail.
up corner bakery, like kind of sandwiches and stuff.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, you can find me. I'll be around for a little while. And but thanks for listening.
No, I wanted to ask you, with 1031 exchanges,
Yes.
like, it's only 45 days to identify the property.
Yeah.
So are you having problems with that, especially in California, identifying property?
Well, the property doesn't have to be in the same state or the same county even. So people are identifying property in other states. So
They can go over to state to state?
yeah, because it's a federal you know, exemption or whatever. Sorry.
You go into it.
Yeah, there's DST.